Welcome back to In Your Money. We're discussing retirement and financial planning. My guests are Palissa Dube and Daryl Bennett. If you'd like to email me, you'll see my email address on the screen. Let's just come back to this. It's all fair and well, you know. When we talk about financial planning, you've got to do the exercise. You've got to have a look at where you are today, what other future money are you going to be saving, what returns you're going to get. You've got to look at the budget that you have today and say, well, when you spoke about slicing and dicing, at retirement there's certain items that are not going to be in your budget. Home should be paid for, you should have a good healthcare program. That's a subject on its own, how people are going to afford healthcare. I've seen the healthcare companies come up with the increases, anything between 7.5% to 10.5% increases going forward. And then you've got to say education and even savings at retirement. I'm not going to be drawing and saving. So there's a hell of a lot to do. But Daryl, talk us through that.
You've got to trust the process. I've realized, and I learned from the Financial Planning Institute, and Palissa will vet this, that the process is critical. And when I sit with a client and I go through the 6-step process, that's an international process of defining the relationship, gathering the information, analyzing the information, putting in plans and analyzing and review it. If you trust the process...
Just slow down there. I think that's very important. Just go slower on the 6 principle.
Okay, so you start off with defining the relationship. Within itself is very important, okay? And I say to my clients, there's got to be a good rapport. If the client is sitting there and thinks, I don't like that Daryl Bennett, it's okay. I can handle the rejection. I don't want to work with them, and vice versa. Gathering the information, equally critical. You've got to get all the information, depending on what the mandate is and how deep you want to go. That could require a lot of information, especially if there are different entities involved.
And I compare that to being a general practitioner dentist. Get information and then start to pull teeth. Because I forgot about this and I forgot about that,
First get the information, then you analyze the information, then you make recommendations, then you implement the plan, and then you do an annual review and assess it. And that annual review could be a biannual or a quarterly review, just depending on the needs of the client.
Well, I hope our viewers picked up that, because I think that's very, very important, the steps that your financial planner should be taking. And I'm sure you'd agree with that, Palissa.
Absolutely.
Anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think there are a number of concepts that retirees particularly have to be comfortable with when they get to that stage of their lives. We talk about drawdowns. So in other words, how much are you going to withdraw from your pension fund? And that's very important. I mean, we're talking about making sure that you've got money for 20 to 30 years, and in some cases even longer. So one needs to understand that if you're going to start drawing quite aggressively from that portfolio very early on, then the likelihood of it lasting for as long as you need it to decreases. So that drawdown, the rate that you're withdrawing when you start off, is very important. And if you are an individual and you need to be withdrawing more than 5%, you must already know that you're in a bit of trouble. Preferably, we need that percentage to be lower. And then Daryl also spoke about how that portfolio is going to be invested. You know, often retirees make the mistake of thinking that, well, I'm retired now, a lot of my money needs to sit in the bank account. I'm going to, you know, invest in a whole lot of fixed deposits and things like that. Those kind of cash investments are not going to help your portfolio keep up with inflation, and that's actually the enemy in the room that we need to be addressing. So the composition of that portfolio is very important. Quite a large proportion of it still needs to be invested in what we would call growth assets. So in other words, in equity, both locally and offshore, perhaps a bit of property as well, because it needs to be working for you, even in your retirement years.
And that's where it's so scary.
But this inflation, if I can add, which is the second biggest risk after capital loss, is a very, very big threat. And people have a false sense of security in keeping money in the bank, getting the bank statement and seeing the value going up because they're earning interest. But if the inflation rate is higher than the interest, in real terms, they're going backwards.
Well, you're going to pay tax. People don't always realize you're going to pay tax.
That's a different discussion.
You know, there's gross versus net. Yes. But that is where the fear comes in. And that's where we say, we start off as financial advisors. We often end up as financial nannies. Please tell us what to do. And that we can't do that any longer, because we've got to make sure the individual understands. And then the financial psychologist.
And financial coaching.
Yeah.
Financial coaching.
Yeah. So those are very important. Let's get to some of our emails. And there were other questions I wanted to raise with you, but we'll have to leave that for another program. Pete in Boxburg says, how can I incorporate tax-efficient investments strategies into my retirement plan? Palissa?
Well, I think you need to understand that your retirement plans, that's about one of the most tax efficient instruments that one can invest in. Firstly, as you are, in your earlier years contributing to the retirement fund, you're getting a deduction of, the income that you're taxed on. Secondly, as long as the money is in the retirement vehicle, you're not going to pay any form of tax. Nothing on the interest that you've earned, nothing on the dividends that you've earned, no capital gains tax. The only time you start paying tax is when you start taking money out of this retirement pot. So in other words, as any lump sum that you take out will be taxed. Any income, monthly income that you take will then be taxed. So understand that a retirement vehicle in and of itself is actually quite a tax efficient instrument.
And I think essential for retirement.
Absolutely.
It's not about should I have one, shouldn't I?
Absolutely.
It is together with all your other investments, an and. I always say it's not an or, it's an and.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And other things, like a tax-free investment, often people look at it and say, well, 36,000 Rand a year, what's that? Well, if you started early enough, that can actually help you accumulate quite a neat sum of funds over time. Yes, there's a lifetime limit of 500,000 at the moment, but invested in a good portfolio that's got, I would say like an inflation plus 6 type of portfolio. In other words, you need to have the mindset that the money that you're putting in a tax-free investment is long-term money. I often see investors using that in a banking product, and I think that's an opportunity lost. So use a tax-free investment as an example.
It should be seen as a retirement product.
Exactly.
I know we do it, parents do, and grandparents do it for children. And if you think about it, I'm going to be simple. Over the last 5 years, they've been in, that's about 180,000 you could have funded together with growth. If you put that and pay tax on that, dividend tax, capital gains tax, tax on interest and all things, you'd have 20% less. Daryl, how do you see this question?
I agree 100%. I think I call it a personal pension. It's the retirement annuity, the retirement fund, be it provident pension. Added to that is the endowment wrapper for high income taxpayers. Where you've got preferential tax rates, you've got 30% on
big difference.
12% on capital gains versus 18 effectively is a 33% arbitrage. It's massive. Not only that, but when that person passes one day, you don't have executive fees, but more than that, you don't have to deal with the receiver of revenue. You don't have to worry about RT3, A, B, and C certificates. It's seamless. The insurer pays the taxes, so you can go into your retirement, or the widow can then get redemptions out of these wrappers, these endowment wrappers that I think are fabulous. But going back to the retirement annuity or the pension fund, I think it's a wonderful product. I think because you're getting the tax break inside, you could fund even more than the government gives you as a deduction going in, because you'll get that coming out as a 10C exemption.
And you're
getting the benefit of the growth tax rolled up. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful tool, besides protecting you from creditors if something goes wrong with your business.
Okay, you guys have an easy program. Now I'm going to put it on to you. When I started in the industry, what do you think tax rates were? Have I asked you this question before?
In the retirement
in the 60s, what do you think the tax deduction was what was maximum marginal rate of tax?
15%, let's say.
Melissa?
30?
You see, neither of you passed this. They never asked you this.
Yeah.
It was 72% with a further 6% loan levy. So, and retirement annuities in 68 increased from 1,200 to 2,000, and people queued. Because I was a clerk at that stage, working for my mentor, his name was Lou Miller, and they queued outside Liberty's building right round the block to put their money in before the 29th of February. It was a leap year, because you saved. And what do you think estate duty was?
R1 million.
No, what do you think the percentage?
I thought it was a fixed number of 1 million.
45%. Anyway, I've jumped the gun. I just want to talk a bit about retirement. I'm going to jump to an email that's still going to come up, but I want to talk. It's from Joel in Inanda. And Joel in Inanda is talking about the two-pot system. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I'd like to raise the following. He says he got his statement at the end. Now, I just got it. And he's already seen that on his statement, they've now moved vested portion, they've moved the future retirement pot, and they've now moved the savings pot. But what he's found was interesting. They are continuing with the exact same investment strategy in all three, the vested and the two-pot system, as previously. And his question to me is, aren't many people who are going to use that savings pot going to find that if it's invested, let's say, in a growth protected, more growth, younger growth, they could find out the end of the come year that, let's assume I put in 12,000, I'm only going to get back 10,000 because of the fall in the markets. Have you come across that? Have you thought about that?
Not yet, but they are pro-ratering it. Listen, I think that question delves into a deeper question, you know, to kind of look at his retirement planning from a broader perspective. But going back to that, they pro-rata it. Remember,
but pro-rated in the same fund.
Yes, but even before the two-pot system, you would have needed to have some portion, 2.5% in cash, because you've got to pay fees. You've got to pay fees to the administrator. And so therefore, you can't, and also because of Reg 28, you can't have all your money in equity. So there should be money in cash for the withdrawal and for paying fees.
Well, all I'm saying to you, Joel, I am going to speak to the companies because I can understand your situation. And forget, there's so many people who are now in the two-pot wanting to build assets into the savings pot so they can draw. And do they now have to inform the insurance companies about changing from maybe a more aggressive portfolio to something more? Anything you want to add something, Melissa?
I wanted to add to that I actually agree with that allocation, because remember what the savings pot is and why the legislation has moved in this direction. If we are saying that the savings component needs to be invested in some kind of money market to ready it for people when, you know, when they withdraw, that defeats the purpose of what that pot is. It's meant to be an emergency pot. It's not a pot that you're going to call on every year. So if 30%, because that's a third of it, a third of your contributions are now going to go into the savings component. If that's going to be invested in a money market or that kind of asset class, it would damper the performance of the overall portfolio over time. And then, you know, it puts people in jeopardy as to reaching their retirement goals one day. So the savings component, as much as it is available for one to withdraw when the need arises, the intention for it is not for one to go every year to withdraw.
And there are a lot of people who don't want that savings pot. They want to, but they've got no choice. If you're under 55 and you're in retirement, you're going to be two pots. So, as you say, keep it there.
Yeah.
We'll deal with that. We didn't deal with so many questions today. I'll get you back again, both of you again soon. I hope you enjoyed the program. But when creating a financial plan, it's important to dedicate quality time to ensure it's done thoroughly. Regular reviews, at least once a year, are essential to keep the plan on track. And the relationship between you and your financial planning, as I said, is a two-way partnership with shared responsibility to ensure that actions are taken. Since the changes that occur in during the year, your financial planner may not be aware of it. Paulissa, Daryl, thank you for joining me this evening. It's important to note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program, we'll once again be dealing with estate planning, and if you need to get hold of me or you need to get hold of Paulissa or Daryl, please email me and I'll put you in touch. Thank you for watching and good night.